Welcome, welcome everybody. How are you doing today? It's so very nice to have you here. So, why do we need to awaken? This really is one of the questions and topics for our upcoming 3-week intensive. The time is now, true surrender and removing obstacles to awakening. So, when I speak about awakening, what I'm really speaking about is a permanent shift from knowing yourself as this body-mind, from identifying yourself as this body-mind, to knowing yourself as presence. So why do we need to awaken? Awakening stops the search until we know for sure that presence is our true nature. The mind is going to engage in doubt, in question, and in search. And so it is always going to have this power over you, over your attention. It's always going to have this power to pull your attention back to believing yourself to be something, and therefore back into suffering. And eventually back or continuing in this cycle of life, birth, life, and death. So why do we need to awaken? Because we want to know for sure who we really are. And we want to stop this search, stop this outgoing movement of the mind. And even though after awakening, awakening doesn't mean the end of arising of the patterns of the past. That's also often a common misunderstanding, right? So even though after awakening, patterns of the past still arise here, there really is no question or no doubt about who we really are, what really is our true nature. Very powerful, right? Very powerful shift. I have been speaking a lot about surrender lately because surrender is so close to my heart. And surrender is such a core of this teaching. And when I say surrender, I mean the mind merging in the heart. That means the mind merging in truth, in presence, in our true nature. That really is the true understanding of surrender, right? So often we think about surrender, different. We think many different things, what it looks like, of what kind of action or what kind of experience. The mind merging in the heart. And also, a different aspect of surrender, which is really recognizing and following the movement within. The movement within that is so different than our mind, or so different than the mind. And that movement, recognizing it, following it, relying on it, that is what brings us closer and closer to our true nature, or it brings us into a fuller moment of trust, which really is what is needed and necessary for awakening. I also want to speak a little bit more and clarify again in our intensive, the question of karma, destiny, and free will. Because, when clarified well, when you understand that well, that is really going to clarify your practice. Because there's so often this misunderstanding or question about what is it that we can really do, right? What can we really do? And to understand that in a moment we really have a choice. The only choice is to either postpone being here which then of course, only postpones, right? So then we're going to have to do it later. So then whatever is arising or whatever is happening or whatever the circumstances are, that's going to have to repeat itself, right? We're going to have to come to it at some point. It doesn't go away just because we postpone, right? Or we can simply let ourselves be here, right? That is really the choice that we have. And by the way, in that moment when you really let yourself be here, that's the end of the past. That's the end of karma, destiny, which really is action, right? Movement that has been set in motion, right? And it's just now coming to fruition. So the moment you are here, the moment you say, can I really be here? Brings us back to surrender, right? That's the end of the past. I'm also going to be speaking more about the nervous system and trauma, and how trauma and how capacity of the nervous system altogether affects our ability to be here. I have been speaking about this for a very long time right now, many, many years, and it's such an important key for awakening, embodiment, and freedom. And we really need to grow capacity of the nervous system to be here so that when past arises, we really have the ability to experience it, to be present to it, not just be moved by it, or not just engage in it, or not just end up in reactivity to it. And so trauma past is a big part of that, because trauma, if we understand it as a charge that is still present in your nervous system, it really affects your ability to be here. And sometimes we really need these very specific tools on how to be here. We need to understand the nervous system and brain, how it works, how it functions, and how can we be here, because otherwise that becomes that, peril. Even though there's a strong desire for truth, you end up not being able to be here because you don't have enough of the tools on how to do it. And that really creates more doubt and more question about who we are, about our ability to be here. So it's very important to address this. It's very important to learn these skills. However, we also want to keep it in perspective. For those of you who have been working with me for a longer period of time, sometimes, and please just hear that, sometimes the understanding of the nervous system and brain becomes a little bit more of a priority by itself in general. And we really don't want to end there, right? We also need to engage in this very direct inquiry, a very direct inquiry that removes the obstacles to awakening, a very direct inquiry that engages in clarifying and removing of the layers of misunderstanding and identification that we may have, that we may be believing ourselves to be something, right? And the very direct inquiry of removing obstacles to awakening, it's going to really reveal that for you. So you can see, right? It's very, very important. It's such an important part of being able to be here, right? And being able to rest in our true nature. So I really want to invite you to participate, and this intensive is open to everybody. However, I really want to encourage our returning students to come and join me in this intensive, as we are just going to be continuing the work that we have been doing for the past few months regarding surrender. And I'm also going to really work with you on strengthening discrimination, which is the ability to recognize the difference between past and present. Such an important part. Again, the combination of discrimination and capacity of the nervous system to be here, right? And surrender, such an important part of our ability to be here, such a key for awakening, embodiment, and freedom. So I'm very much looking forward to our time together. And also, if you like this video, please like us, please subscribe. And yeah, so you can watch some more when new videos are available.